What is up, guys? What you saw right there and what you're watching some gameplay of right now is the 8.3 Frost Mage Glacial Spike build. It lets you do absolutely insane single target damage and cleave as well. You'll be doing 1 million, 1.5 million Glacial Spikes throughout the entire course of the fight, and you'll be critting almost every single one of those. If you're a Fire Mage right now, if you have the Masterful gear, you're able to do this build, and I would highly recommend trying it. It has seriously been some of the most fun gameplay I have had in a while. I did not expect to see it coming from Frost of all specs, but it has been freaking awesome. Now, let me show you what you need to do in order to play this build. Alright, I'm going to quickly go over the talents and gear that you need to have in order to properly do this build. You're going to want to have for talents Bone Chilling, Incanter's Flow, Frozen Touch, Splitting Ice, and Glacial Spike definitively. You need to have all of those chosen in both AoE and single target scenarios. Shimmer and Ice Ward can be changed. I always suggest keeping them the same though. Bone Chilling, what it does is it gives you a buff whenever you try to chill your target, right? So every Frost Bolt will give you a damage buff, 0.5% for 8 seconds, as you can see, and it stacks. So it ends up helping you a lot because you're going to be casting a lot of Frost Bolts to generate your Icicles, which then turn into Glacial Spikes. Incanter's Flow is what you need for this one because you're going to be matching the peak of Incanter's Flow with the time that Glacial Spike hits, which I'll show you once we start doing the rotation. Frozen Touch is great because you get Brain Freeze procs more, which are necessary to make the Glacial Spikes crit, which make them do so much damage so consistently. Ice Ward, like I said, it's optional. I like it because I run high corruption a lot of the time and helps me keep off those things from beyond. Splitting Ice is the best for AoE because it just doubles Glacial Spike's damage if there's more than one target. It is freaking sick. And then, of course, build is built around Glacial Spike, so you gotta pick that. For the gear, you're gonna want to have 3 Flash Freeze Azurite traits. See, I have one on my helm, my shoulders, and my chest. The other traits, there are ones that are better, like Trade Winds is really, really good, but it's kind of tough to get. But just focus on getting the 3 Flash Freezes. The 3 Flash Freezes are what you need to have. For stat priority, you're going to want to put Mastery over everything. I have like 5.5k Mastery. And for Corruption, you want to stack Masterful, just to get that Mastery even higher. For Trinkets, I run the Bellfire Branch because it gives you extra Mastery and an on-use, which I like. And I will show how to use on-uses with this build because it's a little bit different than most people would expect. And then I like using 1 on use and 1 proc-based trinket. And the best proc-based trinket this patch is pretty much the Vita Charged. A little tough to get, but that's how it is. Alright, for essences, you're going to want to have either Memory of Lucid Dreams or Condensed Life Force as your major. And that's for single target, of course. But for multi-target and like just in Mythic Plus in general, I usually run Essence of the Focusing Iris because it's just like a flat damage essence. And really, nothing else helps you too much. Maybe Memory of Lucid Dreams could help you because you get more Splitting Ice procs and stuff. But it's just like too long of a cooldown, kind of. And I don't know, it doesn't always work in every situation. It's nice to have that like on-demand, like burst AoE that Focusing Iris has. But whenever you're running Memory of Lucid Dreams, you don't have to worry about getting it as a minor, but if you're running any other essence, you're going to want to make sure to have the Memory of Lucid Dreams minor. And while we're talking about minors, you should probably have Conflict and Strife in there as well. So Memory of Lucid Dreams, Conflict, and Strife are usually 2 good ones to have. And then your third one should be one of the Corruption bonus minors. So like either Breath of the Dying or the Formless Void work there. I like using the Formless Void in Raid because more people are using their essences, so it procs more, you have higher uptime, it ends up being pretty nice. That should be about it, and we can get into the rotation now. Alright, so this build's actually very simple at its core. It has a very simple rotation, but there's a lot you can do to get extra DPS out of the rotation once you understand the basic core of it. So I'm going to go over the basic core of the rotation. Assuming you're familiar with Frost Mages and their different procs and abilities, you're going to want to cast Frostbolt to accumulate Icicles. And once you have 5 Icicles, you can cast a Glacial Spike. And before you cast your Glacial Spike, you're going to want to have a Brain Freeze proc, right? And whenever you cast Glacial Spike, you see that long cast right there, you want to queue up, using your spell queue window, you want to queue up your instant cast Flurry to happen right after it. And what that does is it makes your Glacial Spike always shatter the target. And what shatter does is it increases your critical strike by a crap ton. And it makes the Glacial Spikes crit almost every time. So that is the basis of the rotation, right? You see me doing it right here. Well, the next thing that you should focus on once you get that down, and it shouldn't take you very long to get that down, honestly. But the next thing you want to focus on is, you can see my Incanter's Flow stacks in the middle of my screen, right above my cast bar. And the goal that you should have is you want your Glacial Spikes to hit right as your Incanter's Flow stacks are at 5. You're going to need a weak aura, but I will link that in the description of the video. And you're going to want to make sure every Glacial Spike hits. Don't start casting it at 5, because it won't get off by then. You want to start casting it about 3 stacks, maybe less, maybe more, depending on what your haste is at. But I always start it like right at 3, and then it gets off right whenever 5 hits. And that's when it snapshots your intellect. And with your intellect being snapshot at a higher level, it allows the Glacial Spikes to get higher damage. And if you do that over the course of a fight, it adds up a lot of extra damage. And not just that, but you start getting into a rhythm, and at least with my haste and what I've seen a lot of other players haste at, right, you're able to get into a rhythm where and by the time you get your Frostbolt back, you cast another one off, and it ends up being like perfectly aligned throughout your rotation. Ends up being very nice. Now, the next thing that I want to mention is, I said that I use the on-use, the Balefire branch, right? Well, most classes have you use their on-use just right at the beginning of their rotation, right when they start doing burst, right? Well, with this build, your burst starts at the first Glacial Spike you cast, but in order to optimize it even more than casting or using your trinket right before you cast Glacial Spike, what you're going to want to do is spell queue up, like you're going to want to cast your Glacial Spike, spell queue up your instant cast Flurry, and then you're going to want to use your Balefire branch and use it before it hits the target even. And I'll slow it down so you can see this happening, and I'll zoom in a little bit. But you can see me using the Balefire branch before it hits the target and snapshots the damage. So I get all the intellect from that. I get all the intellect from Incanter's Flow, which you're not always going to line up with the Balefire branch, because you kind of ignore Incanter's Flow whenever you first start your rotation with like Icy Veins and stuff. But it ends up for a lot of damage. Alright, so the next little trick that I want to show you is something I learned from another mage helping me out. One day, actually, I was running Fire and he was running Frost and Keys. And notice what I do here instead of flurrying, right? I use my pet's freeze while I'm casting Glacial Spike. I'm going to slow down again and watch. I don't flurry. I use my pet's freeze while I'm Glacial Spiking, right? And that's the only other way that you can get a shatter with Glacial Spike. One more time. Look at that. And then it shatters, does over 1 million damage. And you aren't able to do this on bosses, of course. One more time. But mobs in dungeons are like super good to do this to, right? Just to make sure I've hit all the bases, I'm going to show you the opener real quick. You really just pop all of your stuff, like Icy Veins, Guardian of Azeroth, if you're running that essence, and like Frozen Orb, right? And the only difference from your regular rotation is you ignore Incanter's Flow because you have such high haste that you're actually able to get like 2 Glacial Spikes off in one like full cycle of Incanter's Flow. So you want to just ignore it until your haste goes down to a level where you can like sustain like this cycle of it. The only other thing for the rotation that I would like to mention, I guess, is like they call it the no Ice Lance build because you never have to cast Ice Lance. Like, I never even mentioned Ice Lance. But there are times where you do need to be casting Ice Lance, and that's mostly either on the move, right? Or if you're trying to get your Incanter's Flow back up and you have like a global or two, right? Before it gets up to like 3 where you want to start casting Glacial, but you already have all your Icicles and you have like some procs of Ice Lance. You can use them then. Like, that's fine. It helps you move. And of course, if you're on the move, you have to be casting Ice Lance. There's really no other spells to be doing, maybe like Cone of Cold or whatever. But Ice Lance is mostly better. And the last thing I'd like to say is, for your AoE rotation, it is exactly the same. It is awesome. That's why I love this build so much. It is exactly the same, and it pumps too. But whenever you're doing your AoE rotation, of course, like normal, you want to have your Frozen Orb on cooldown. If you're running Focusing Iris, you want to use it on cooldown for AoE situations. And then if it's, I believe, 3 to 4 targets or more, you're going to want to be using Blizzard. That'll help refresh your, Frozen Orb quicker and just does a lot of damage. Use Blizzard on cooldown if it's like 3 to 4 targets or more. And that's about it. Well, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Send me some feedback. I'll leave my Discord. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. You definitely need to give this build a try. It's seriously so fun. I play it in any keys that aren't like 18s or higher, really, because like Fire doesn't do that well whenever the targets die too quick. And this is really what you should be playing, those lower keys. And if you want to log as Frost and Raid, this is the best build to do it with, definitively. Every like top 10 parts for every fight is this build. It's going to be awesome. You're going to enjoy it. I'm sure you will. Anyway, have a good one. Hope you enjoyed the video.